everyone. Welcome back to the Visually Hidden Podcast. I'm Peter O'Brien, and once again, joining me today is Mr. Steven Bendler.
How's it going?
And Mademoiselle Anne Milleville.
Bonjour, hi.
We have finally gotten through our Shocktober coverage, and let me just say, that was a marathon of endurance. You know what? I've found myself the past week or so, I've had a little bit of Shocktober withdrawal going on in my life, and I don't know, like while we were going through it, correct me if I'm wrong if you guys had a different experience, but I couldn't wait for the end. Like it got to a point when we were in the 20s and I was kind of like, oh man, why can't this just be over? Why do I do this to myself?
I felt a little bit like that. That's I think it depends on the day, what else I was, doing, and then setting time aside to watch all of the different movies. And yeah, sometimes it's like, oh man, I just wish this was over, and then it's over. And you're like, I don't have anything I have to watch or I should be watching, or so it's like taking down the decorations, when all the skulls go back in the box.
It was a bit hard at the beginning because I'm not a big fan of horror movies, so watching one per day was such a challenge. But actually, at the end, I liked it. Every morning, I was like, okay, today I'm gonna have to watch a movie, and I liked this routine. But and now I kind of miss it.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm feeling. Like I missed having something to watch. And I think it was just that routine of like watching stuff. So I think maybe watching a horror movie every day was what was getting to me, just all the doom and gloom and like bittersweetness.
Yeah, I mean I love horror movies. I do. But sometimes, when I do these every October, watch one a day, it gets to be a little taxing on the brain, all the murder and the bloodshed and the whatever. And sometimes, I'll lighten it up. I'll watch a little wrestling or something like that before I go to bed, or just, kind of break it up a bit. Something funny, maybe, But yeah, but overall, I miss it.
Yeah, because I didn't like horror movies before, and you noticed I said I didn't, because now I kind of appreciate some of them. It was like a surprise for me every day. So yeah, I really liked it. I was surprised so many times during this challenge that I can't wait for next year, actually.
There you go. You have a convert. Look at that.
Yeah. The system works. Cool. Yeah, it's funny that you said that, Steve, about like after you would watch some of the horror movies during Shocktober, you would cool off by wrestling. There were some movies after we watched them, it's like I just need a pick me up. So I would watch, like we watched Buried, and then like I had to watch Halloween to take the edge off.
Yeah.
As it went on, I just became like less interested in watching people die and less interested in them cry, and just all the sorrow and everything was just kind of like wearing me down, man. But at the same time, it got to November 1st, November 2nd, November 3rd, and it's like, all right, what are we going to watch today? Now it becomes like a quest or a hunt. And so I was just curious, what have you guys been watching this past week or so that maybe you hadn't seen before, or maybe revisiting just again to recalibrate your brain?
So to get away from all the horror and misery, my wife and I, we did a recap of all the Hunger Games movies. So that was a lot of fun. And then, of course, yesterday I watched Child's Play with my kids. So it's like horror never really goes away in my house, because my kids are like at the ages where they're getting curious about it and they want to, explore some of these movies. And I'm like, let's just start with something that's not so bloody or terrifying, or so I'm trying to ease them into it. So yesterday we watched Child's Play, so that was interesting.
So Steve isn't necessarily taking his foot off the pedal so much as he just is easing off.
Yeah.
So I went to theater. I watched the two French movies, but I can say the name, the titles, but I'm not sure you heard of them. I saw Bernadette with Catherine Deneuve, and Complètement Cramé with John Malkovich. It's a French movie, but John Malkovich is in it. And also I watched Requiem for a Dream and Mr. Nobody, with both with Jared Leto, because I love this guy. I think he's completely crazy. He's really committed in everything he does. So I wanted to see those two movies that I heard a lot about, but I didn't watch before. So yeah, good experience.
Did you see he climbed the Empire State Building?
Yeah, of course I heard of it, and Pete told me when he heard about it. So yeah, he's completely crazy, but that's what I love about him. He does things that nobody
But
does.
if it was Tom Cruise would have did with no wires, though. You know what I mean? So there's that. But
Sure.
I used to dislike Jared Leto. I used to hate actually Jared Leto, and then he won me over. So like, the scene.
How did he win you over?
I think part of it was Panic Room. That was like a little bit like, okay, he's not so bad. I just couldn't deny how fantastic he was in Dallas Buyers Club.
Me too. Big fan of this movie.
And 30 Seconds to Mars, he's got a great voice, so it's like sometimes like begrudgingly I'm like, okay, all right, fine. I give the guy's talented, but I used to love when he used to get the shit kicked out of him in Fight Club. And I used to love the scene with Paul Allen in American Psycho. So I used to look forward to those when I disliked him. But now I'm on the Leto train. So
Yeah, he is pretty good, and he's another one of those celebrities. I don't know if he's like drinking the blood of babies or what, but he is just forever young, that guy. I mean,
Yeah.
he can still pass for like 25, 30, even though he's like in his 50s, like, and he's climbing the Empire State Building like freaking King Kong. Like, good for him.
yeah, it's like him, Tom Cruise, Paul Rudd. It's like the Lost Boys. Never grow old, never die, live forever. So
the first thing that I watched after Shocktober wrapped up, because I was on such a high from Vincent Price, was The Bat, which is a murder mystery that he did. And then my wife, she's a big fan of the My Big Fat Greek Wedding films, specifically the first one. The second one's okay, but she really likes the first one because it just reminds her a lot of her family and their relationships and quirkiness. So we watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding Part 3, and, well, it was disappointing. Both of us together, we couldn't quite put our finger on it, but I have to think that it might have been with the direction. And the lead actress, who also wrote all 3 films, she directed this one, and I think maybe she just didn't shoot enough coverage, because the editing, there are some awkward edits in the film. And then we did check out the new Sylvester Stallone documentary on Netflix called Sly. I'm not even going to try to lie. I am a fan of Sylvester Stallone. I really love that dude. I think he has a very consistent track record. Yeah, he does the big action movies, but I mean, he also writes a lot of really good films and a lot of really good parts and a lot of really good dramatic. You take a look at Rocky, and then you look at John Rambo, and they are like a yin and a yang in terms of characters, but they are the same vessel, And then even in his later work, last year we watched Tulsa King, and that was a really fantastic series, and he was awesome in it. So, if you're interested, the Sly documentary is a pretty good one. They kind of gloss over a lot of stuff. They really kind of focus on the significance of Rocky and then what that did to his career.
Yeah.
And him as a person. They really explore that a lot.
I'm with you. I think Sly is great, and he's always entertaining. I really enjoyed Tulsa King, and yeah, I was waiting for that documentary to come out, so I'm gonna have to check that out.
While we were talking about Shocktober, we were kind of exploring a lot of different things, and we were talking about some of the short films that we had worked on, and some of our approaches to writing within our own films. And one thing that always comes up whenever you're making a film are technical difficulties, and they can come in any way, shape, or form. And I just wanted to explore technical difficulties a little bit because, for me personally, I try to block them out. I try to forget them because they're mistakes, and sometimes they can be very traumatic. But at the same time, I also try to embrace them because that is where you get your experience points from. That's the learning part of filmmaking, and there's no substitute for it. I know that on every single film I've ever worked on, whether it's mine or somebody else's, there has always been problems. There are things you just cannot foresee, and even if you plan, as I like to, there are things that pop up day of that you just cannot plan for. Sometimes they're technical, sometimes they're personal, Sometimes they're out of your hands completely. Sometimes it's the weather doesn't want to behave. And like that's the day you scheduled 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago. It's like, okay, everybody, we're going to be shooting outside. And then the clouds roll in, and well, now your continuity is shot, or you just got to wait it out. So there's always a problem. And I think the true merit of a filmmaker is how they kind of come over it or adapt to it. Because again, when you're making an independent film, there's not a lot of time and there's even less money. So you're kind of locked into this situation. But Steve, I know you and I have worked on some films together. Do you recall any times we encountered technical difficulties or anything else?
Yeah, there's a couple things that stand out in my mind. I think the biggest one is when we were filming Misery Loves Company. Our lead actress broke her ankle, fractured her ankle, right?
Yeah. So Carly Ballister, our lead actress in Misery Loves Company, she played Veronica. And smack in the middle of our production, I get a phone call that she was doing a play simultaneously. Like we were filming during the day and during the week, and then somebody put her down after one of the dance numbers and they put her down wrong, and she like twisted her ankle and it was sprained. She had it wrapped up. She could not walk on her ankle. And now, if you have seen Misery Loves Company, there is a scene where we actually like go on a hike through the woods up to a cliffside. And this scene was coming, so I was very, very nervous that she would not be able to do it. But she said she just needed a few days to let it heal. You know, she was trained as a dancer, and so she kind of knows her body, knows her feet, knows her limits. But yeah, Steve, can continue. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to
No,
set the
no,
stage, and
that's
then
it.
I'll come back in with more.
I think that was my longest day on set, was 12 hours. We were like trying to figure out she's supposed to walk out the door, say, the whole goodbye scene at the door of the apartment, and how we're going to make that happen. And I was like, all right, well, I can stand in the hallway and catch her if she can like hobble to on one pin and just kind of jump out of the doorway. I'll catch her on the other side. And so that's what happened. And to her credit, man, she was game. They're like, let's just do it. Let's
Hmm.
try it. You and I think we're a little more nervous about her getting hurt even further, but she was very much game for it. And to your credit, when you watch the film, you can't tell that there's anything wrong with her. You can't see her diving out of frame, or my arm catching her or anything like that. So I think that always stood out to me as like, oh boy, what are we gonna do here? This is the lead actress, man. How do there's only so
Hmm.
much you can finagle, but I think it came out really nice in the overall.
It is a technical difficulty because, yeah, now your lead actress, who was walking earlier in the shot, earlier in the movie, now she cannot walk without crutches. She had this big bandage wrapped around her foot, and so we also had to get creative with the framing. And there are some shots in the film, especially in this sequence. There's a couple of shots where her foot is hidden behind a piece of furniture, so you cannot tell that it's wrapped up in a bandage. And or when she's walking, like we don't actually see her walking, we just see her bob through the frame or go to take a step and then stop and we cut. But yeah, when she had to fall out the doorway into your arms, that was a lot of fun. I remember during Misery Loves Company, we had a problem with the memory card.
Hmm.
We had just filmed a very dramatic scene smack in the middle of the movie, and it was one of those situations where we were already over schedule. We could not film it again for a number of reasons. And after we had shot it, we went to import the footage and it was not on the card. And I lost my mind.
Yes, you did.
I did not know what to do. And then we started looking into it. There were some cooler heads around, and they were like, what if we got some like card recovery software? We started looking into that, and we actually downloaded this card recovery software on a whim that it would work. And sure enough, it was the best $20 I ever spent, because all of our files were there. We got them back, and we didn't have to plan a reshoot for this scene.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know how much of a technical malfunction this is, but I remember the day we did this stuff on the mountainside, on the cliffside, and we were like, all right, everyone have everything we need, and then we hike up the side of this mountain, and it was, I don't know, probably like what, half an hour trek up the side of this thing, and then we get to the top, and then we realize what was missing. Something.
I think it was the reflector, the light
The
bounce
light bounce.
bounce reflector.
And then you said to me, hey, Steve, would you mind going down and getting the reflector? And I said, no, not at all. I just don't know that I'll get back. I don't know. I don't know where the hell I'm going. Begrudgingly, Louise stepped up and
Yeah.
went down the side of the mountain and came back up, and God bless her for it. I would have been still lost on the mountain if I had went, because I didn't know
Yeah.
where the hell I was. This is my first time there. So yeah, she did it in record time too.
I remember that same day we were filming. We were filming a lot that day. It was a big outdoor day, and we were filming. We filmed Carly's side of the end sequence. We filmed stuff in the cemetery, and then we filmed stuff on the hike, and then we filmed stuff on the mountaintop, and then later we filmed stuff in the bar. So it was a big day of filming. I think we had like 70 setups for that particular day, which is a little insane.
Yeah.
But I remember we were filming with the car and the car wouldn't start. And I think you might actually be able to see some of this in the behind the scenes footage. There's a behind the scenes video that we did that same day while we were filming all this. You can go check it out on the YouTube channel. But I believe there's some shots of us standing around the open car hood trying to fix it and get it running again. I remember once we got it running, we just left it running.
Yeah.
So when we went to film in the cemetery, we parked it on the far side of the cemetery and then walked deep into the interior, and the car was just running the entire time. I know we started with a full tank and we ended with an empty tank that day because we just weren't sure it was going to start again and we needed it to be running. So that's an example of just, some technical difficulties there. I know when I was filming the house on Peach Avenue, we had some trouble with blood behaving correctly. It would not roll down the way we wanted it to, so it caused numerous takes, and getting the consistency of it correct was a big problem. Also, there's a spoiler alert. There's a creature in the film, and the creature was made up for one take, and that one take involved the creature disappearing into some water. And so we did the one take, but it was not usable. And so then I had to like rethink the ending. We shot it a different way at a later date, but the face is still in a box, I think, in my garage. I still have the Roger face that washed off the actor when he went in the water.
How did you do the blood?
Honestly, the trick with the blood is it's so thick, but if you need it to do certain things or run a certain way, you have to dilute it with water. And this was one of the things that I learned while working on the house on Peach Avenue is just blood wrangling and making it behave the way you want it to. If you want that spatter effect or if you want it to like drip down the frame. There is one shot where we actually had a piece of glass over the camera because we wanted blood literally running down the frame. And that was probably one of the hardest shots to get. I know the actress was not happy on how much time it was taking and how messy she was getting and just having to perform. But it all worked out in the end.
Sometimes you have good surprises in post-production. I don't have your experience, but recently I had some shoot to make for interviews, and I had many noises in the background, and I didn't notice when I was shooting. And of course, after I shot, once I left the interviewee, I heard so many bad sounds like, I don't know, a dog barking or things like that, really annoying stuff. And I was surprised by the guy who made the editing. He was able to remove those kind of sounds. And I really thought it was something you're gonna hear it at the end, but yeah, sometimes you can have good surprises about the post production.
Yeah. So now you're saying he was able to remove
Yeah,
the unwanted noises?
yeah. I was able to remove most of them.
Have you had any other experiences with filming or technical difficulties whilst filming?
Yeah, still my interviews that I made for a podcast of mine. We had many issues for the first interviews we made with the sound. Actually, we made so many tests before going to the interviewee, and everything works well. But it's always like that. When you make a test, it works well, and when you're in reality, it doesn't work. So actually, we found after an hour, we found that the air conditioning was the issue, and it made some interference with the sound. So actually we couldn't use any of the shots we made that day, and it was really a mess because the guy we were interviewing had just an hour for us during the morning, so we took an hour to understand where the issue was. So finally, at the end of the day, he said that he was available to redo it. hopefully, and we find a solution with another
Hmm.
microphone. We change the microphone, but that the kind of stuff we didn't expect. And we had someone to do the editing with us just for the day, and we rented the material just for the day, so it was huge of pressure for us. We didn't have much money, so it was like we have to find a solution today, not tomorrow. So yeah, it was a lot of pressure, but at the end we're very proud of the results. That's the thing, when you have many issues when you're shooting, I think you feel really proud of the result when it looks good. So it's a good lesson of life.
I agree with that 100%. Yeah, when you have problems and you overcome them, it just makes the experience and the result so much more rewarding. The other side of technical difficulties is the audience side, and usually the audience has no idea these problems ever happened. They just see the end result. A lot of times, yeah, it's to the credit of the cast and the crew, the filmmakers. If the audience does not know that there were problems, then you've done a good job. At the same time, the audience doesn't necessarily appreciate the effort
Yeah.
that went into making the film. They just sort of take it for granted, and it's like, oh well, yeah, this movie's awesome and it should be because I paid money to see it and that's what I want. And no, there's a lot of problems, whether it's the independent film or a big Hollywood production. And speaking of big Hollywood productions with a lot of technical difficulties, earlier this week on our YouTube channel, we started a new film recommendation series called Visually Hidden Selects, where we kind of pick a movie that has influenced us or filmmaking in some way, shape, or form. And we just kind of share it in a sort of insightful, analytical way. We try to do it spoiler free for those of you who have not seen it. And we encourage anybody who has not seen the film to check it out. This week, our first film was Jaws. And if you have seen Jaws, please continue listening to the podcast. If you have not seen Jaws, we are going to be spoiling it. And you may want to check out and check back in after you watch the movie. So, moving ahead with that in mind, let's talk about Jaws. The shadow that this film casts, it's just so vast. But jumping in with technical difficulties, yeah, the film, I mean, it went over budget, it went over schedule, it had problems for days. And you can look at documentaries and read books about it, and it's no great secret now, but when the film came out, it was a blockbuster. Everybody was watching this movie. It was the highest grossing movie of its time. And I want to throw it over to you guys about Jaws, because I feel like I talked a bit about Jaws already in the VHS video.
Yeah, so for the first time, I watched it this year. The first time I watched it, I didn't really like it. As you know now, I don't like horror movies. And when I watched it for the first time, it was like a horror movie with a non-realistic shark for me. And it was more than a testosterone movie. You have three men saving an island by killing a shark. Wasn't really something entertaining for me. But then I watched it again because it told me, oh, that's an iconic movie, emblematic movie. You should watch it. You should enjoy it. So I watched it again and I focused on the characters. And actually, when you focused on the characters, you can just like this movie. Really, it's the way they develop the characters is really I loved it now. because of that, when you really take time to understand each of the three characters, it's genius. You have each of them have something special. I'm talking about Quint and Hooper. They are really the opposite of each other, but their opposition will help Brody to kill the shark at the end. I'm sorry, I'm spoiling, but yeah, the anti-hero will become the hero thanks to the others. So yeah, I really love this movie because of the character development. Really, for me, it's the main reason to watch this movie. It's because of that.
Are there any characters that you didn't like?
Mostly all the women in the movie except Ellen Brody, but all the other women I didn't really like them. That's why maybe I didn't like this movie at first, because they are frivolous, overwhelmed all the time by their feelings. I feel that way. Um, Otherwise, no, I liked quite all of them. Even the mayor, I don't remember his name, but the mayor, you understand, his
Mayor Vaughn.
reasons why he doesn't want to close the beach and everything. You understand him, even if you understand he's kind of the bad guy in the story. But that's why I like the way they develop the characters, any of them, because except the woman, because yeah, you can understand their motivation even if you don't agree with them.
There's so much great stuff in this movie all around. I mean, the music is out of this world. Unbelievable filmmaker in Steven Spielberg. The performances are fantastic. The writing is fantastic. But like to Anne's point, one of the things that struck me mostly this time of watching it is you have three main male characters, and never once do they seem like the same guy. There's never any overlap where they're kind of saying the same thing or thinking the same thing. That sounds like an obvious, well, duh, of course they'd be different. But it's not so simple for some writers, and it's not so simple for some directors to keep their characters uniquely to themselves. So Brody's Brody, Hooper's Hooper. You've got Quint is Quint, and they are that person completely, and they never intersect, and there's never overlap in the writing of those characters. They have distinct voices, distinct goals, distinct feelings, and I think that's one of the biggest successes of the film, is the fact that those three individual voices stay true to themselves the entire run of the film. And like you said about technical difficulties and all the problems that this movie had, I think it's a credit to Steven Spielberg, because you're the captain. You know better than anyone, Pete. When you're directing a film, you're the head honcho, you're the final say, you're the end all be all. And I think for him to deal with each one of those problems and navigate the waters, so to speak, is the reason why we got the product that we got. I mean, we're still talking about the movie almost 50 years later. So, I mean, I think that's a testament to him and all the people who worked on that film.
There was another film that I did called Running Through Darkness, and one of the main goals of that film was to just make a film. We didn't have everything locked down before we started. Some of the locations were up in the air. In some cases, minutes before we were shooting the scene, we didn't necessarily have the location locked down. But it was on the schedule, and we had the plan, and we had the script, and my goal was to just keep going, because I knew at the end of the month, at the end of the shooting schedule, we were going to have a movie. And that's partially what happened with Jaws. It's like Steven Spielberg knew, okay, yeah, we're over schedule, we're over budget, but as long as I keep filming at least one scene a day or one shot a day, as long as we keep filming, we will get through this. And at the end of it, there will be a movie. How good it is dependent upon a bunch of other variables, but as long as I keep filming and see it through, there will be a movie at the end. I have friends who are actors who have been in a bunch of movies that never got finished, never got released, because the filmmaker either gave up or ran out of time or ran out of money or ran out of resources, ran out of patience, whatever it is. And those are also kind of technical difficulties. It takes a real focused and committed person to see it through. And like you said, the director is the leader. Everybody's following him. If the director gives up, well, that's just a big derailment for morale on the film. And if you don't give up, then people will continue to follow you. As long as the director shows up and is prepared, then the crew, I found at the cast, are usually, all right, well, if this guy's doing it, then I can do it too. When I was in junior high going into 8th grade, I just decided, like, oh, you know what? I'm going to be a person who reads. In 7th grade, we had to read The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. It was required reading, and I was very familiar with the film. And I think that was something that kind of enlightened me as to, like, oh, you know what? These films that I watch, they come from a story, and in some cases that story is a book. And I know how to read, so what's a movie that I really like that's based on a book? And I started looking, and Jaws was at the top of the list. I mean, at that point in time, I had the VHS. I was watching it very regularly, like multiple times a week. I was watching Jaws on VHS. And so I was like, oh, well, let me check out the book, because I'm familiar with the story. If I get bored or whatever, like, I'll have pictures in my mind already. I'll know what these characters are. It will help me develop my reading. So I went and I got Jaws, and the book could not be more different than the movie. The through line of a shark terrorizing a small New England island community and having to be hunted down and killed is there. That is the premise of the book. But a lot of stuff with the characters and their interactions and their relationships is very, very different in the book. And so as I was reading it, I was like, wow, this is very different. Can they do that? As like a 12-year-old kid, you don't really understand. And maybe a 12-year-old kid shouldn't be reading Jaws. I don't know. But I was interested and I was reading, so I think I get a pass. There's another book called The Jaws Log, written by Carl Gottlieb, who co-wrote the screenplay. And he was one of the actors. He played Meadows, the newspaper reporter. And he wrote a book called The Jaws Log, and it's just basically his production journal of that film. It's really an interesting read for anybody who's interested in filmmaking at any scale, just to see what went into the production of this film and how they achieved the result they did. He was constantly rewriting stuff to accommodate either their filming situation or their character situation.
Upon watching it again this time, there's one scene that really stuck out to me as probably one of the greatest scenes I've ever seen in a movie ever. I don't say that lightly because there's a lot of great scenes out there, but I think it starts out with Brody sitting there at dinner with his son, and the son is mimicking what Brody's doing. And then he says, "Give me a kiss because I need it." And it just shows you the toll of what happened to the Kintner boy, of what it's done to Brody, and him appreciating the fact that he still has his son. That's the one level of that scene. Hooper knocks on the door, lets himself in. He's got the wine. And he says to Ellen, "If your husband's home, I'd like to talk to him." And she's like, "So would I." Just shows you like how in demand Brody is, and she just wants some quality time with the guy himself.
Well, and how detached he is from the situation he's experiencing with the shark. That detachment really is punctuated by her comment there. Furthermore, punctuated by when Brody pours himself a glass of wine. I always love that part of the scene.
Right. That line by Ellen is probably one of the best lines in the film. And then you see Hooper has the faith in Brody that he is a intelligent man and that he wants to do his job to the best of his ability. And I feel like that visit is his last ditch effort to say, you got to be a man and stand up and do what needs to be done here. And when he opens up the wine and just, you're going to let that breathe, and he just pours out the wine. I love the differences in who they are as men. Like Brody's just a meat and potatoes, let's get it done type of guy. Hooper's a little more sophisticated, but he appreciates Brody. And it's like shot for shot, some humor, some seriousness, some humor, some seriousness. And you see the bonds between Brody and Hooper start to form, right? I mean, it started in some of the prior scenes, but that's where it really starts to take hold. And Brody decides he's going to step out of Mayor Asshat's shadow and do what needs to be done for the town. Even Hooper's line, "So how was your day?" I don't think it could be overstated how great of a scene that is and the nuance that goes into something like that. And then, there's also a strong poignancy to that scene. And then, to take it back to when we talked about the Twilight Zone and Spielberg not being present in that scene, that's the thing I'm talking about. That poignancy and that nuance and that sensitivity that you get in that scene is what was lacking in Kick the Can in Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I agree with you about this scene. And you talked about the two men, but I would like to talk about Ellen Brody on that scene too. Because during that scene, she doesn't talk much, but you understand how supportive she is to her husband, even if she doesn't talk, the way she looks at him. And also when Hooper is explaining what he does and everything, is really enthusiastic, while Brody is a bit depressed. And you understand that Ellen talks to Hooper to show his enthusiasm and maybe share it with Brody, hoping he's gonna move on and maybe find hope in Hooper. So the collaboration starts really from that scene.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, just my God, it does so much for the film. I feel like it's almost the heart of the film in a way. That's we're going to get going now, and then they go cut up in the shark, and then and then things take their course. But I don't think, like I said, I don't think it could be overstated how fantastic of a scene that is. I mean, just from the lighting choices to the direction to the acting, to just a little bit of music in there. I mean, just that's a masterclass on subtlety in filmmaking.
It really is an understated scene, and it's kind of the lock-in for the film. It's like that's the turning point for Brody. The scene right before that is his confrontation with Mrs. Kintner on the dock. And not only does he have a confrontation with Mrs. Kintner, but he has a confrontation with the mayor, and he has a confrontation with Hooper. So it's like all of these elements are just coming at Brody from all different sides in that scene. And when Mrs. Kintner slaps him, it's really like his wake-up call. You know, prior to that, he's all happy, like, hey, we got the shark. All right, there's no shark like this in these waters. No, no. And then it's the reality check from Mrs. Kintner that just kind of like knocks over his house of cards, and he has to kind of regroup and rebuild. And even the mayor tries to console him. He's like, no, I'm sorry, Martin. She's wrong. He's like, no, she's not.
Yeah.
And he wanders off to just like start to contemplate it and build his thoughts. And there's a shot of Hooper watching Brody walk away, and you can just see like Hooper's like, he needs something.
Yeah.
And it's wine.
It's a bottle of each, like Billy Joel style, a bottle of red, a bottle of white. But yeah. And if you don't know that Mayor Vaughn's an asshat, just look at the jackets that guy wears. I mean, wow. I mean, this guy, that's one bad jacket, Larry. I'm just going to say that. Jesus Christ. And then he doubles down with that anchor jacket twice.
Oh yeah.
Heavy rotation for that jacket. I guess someone's going to, talk to that guy. Bad fashion sense.
Well, that shit was the style back in the day.
Oh God. What I like about each one of these guys, each one of them, I think, is a complete badass for separate reasons. Hooper's got the balls to get in that cage and go under the water. No thanks. Quint is just out of his mind, right? And while everyone in the town's having this crazy meeting about what to do, he did a little doodle on the back chalkboard of a shark eating a guy. And then he's sitting there with his legs crossed eating a Triscuit. That's a badass entry to a film if I've ever seen one. And then you got Brody in these little short shorts making it work, man. And just up there with the gun and the cigarette hanging out of his mouth. I mean, these guys are three badasses, but they're all unique and they're all different. And it's like they all need each other. And I've appreciated Quint more over time because he realizes when his bold, in-your-face tactics don't work, he starts to kind of ask Hooper, like, "Well, what does this stuff do?" When he realizes he can't quite do it on his own with this one, he's in a way his own worst enemy. He cuts off the radio, he pushes the boat too far, and he's the one who doesn't make it. So I think there's something to be said about being overly aggressive in a situation, not thinking things through, or thinking that you know what's best and not listening to other people.
Oh, well, he's totally Captain Ahab from Moby Dick.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically his storyline from this movie, like repurposed.
Yeah, he gets obsessed.
How old were you the first time you watched it? And when did you think that it was the age for your kids to watch it?
For me, I think the first time I fully saw it all the way through might have been high school or right out of high school, like maybe 18, where I sat down, like, I really want to watch this. Like, I've seen chunks of it, but I want to really watch the movie. I think that was a time for me. And my son just watched it for the first time this year, and he's going to be 11.
Okay.
So, but I think, because Pete and I have talked about this, like, when's the right time to show a kid a certain movie? And I think for a lot of it, it depends on the kid. Like, I know my son knows that this is a fake shark. He likes to watch behind the scenes and making of, because he's already starting to make his own films. Like, he records things, he edits them on his computer, he's off to the races. So he's so fascinated by, like, how did they do that? Because I want to do it. And I was like, he's like, making me nuts. He wants me to take him out to buy him a shark puppet, But then I also showed him stuff like Saturday Night Live, Candygram, when the land shark comes. He thought that was hilarious. Now he gets that joke. My daughters are starting to get interested. They're 7 and 5, and they saw clips of Jaws, but they haven't been scared. They're just like, oh, it's like a big puppet shark, So, like, we're a big Henson family. We love the Muppets and stuff. So they know this stuff is puppeteering and animatronics, and so it's a little different. But I think, to answer your question, it just depends on the kid. I know what'll scare him or what won't scare him, and then I also know how he's going to react. Like, I wouldn't show him a violent movie if I thought he was going to go out and try to hurt somebody. So it depends on the kid for me.
Yeah, because the movie is quite realistic in a way. So I don't know if you live close to the sea, to the ocean, or whatever. But for me, I live close to the ocean when I was a kid, and I'm happy that I didn't watch this movie when I was a kid, because I'm sure that I would have been traumatized or something like that. So, as you said, it depends on the kids. I understand, but yeah.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the VHS video, It was a movie that I would just put on to watch as a small child. Like I'm talking like before kindergarten, I was watching this movie. It's just something that has always been in my life. And then my family and I, we would go on vacation at Cape Cod when I was a kid. We didn't go to Martha's Vineyard where they filmed the movie, but we would go to Truro, which is in Cape Cod. And it's very, very similar architecture, landscape, everything like that. We didn't have to take a ferry to get there, though. We wouldn't necessarily go in the ocean because this is where they filmed Jaws, and who knows? And sure enough, the place we would stay actually turned up on the news a couple of times because of sharks in the bay.
I'm not a beach guy. Like in theory, yeah, the beach sounds cool. And then I get there, I'm like, no, thanks. Like there's sand in my sandwich before I even get out of the car, which I don't know how that happens every time. But then like the fact that I'll get in that sandy, gross water and then I can still get eaten. No, thank you. You can keep all that. You know, I'm a pool guy. I'll be in the pool if you need me.
My son, when he was 3 years old, he got a boat for Christmas, and the boat came with a shark. From that point on, he was obsessed with boats, obsessed with the ocean, and obsessed with giant sharks. So I put on Jaws, and I would not let him watch the graphic scenes, but sometimes I would just cover his eyes. So he would hear the water splashing or people yelling, or he would hear the music. And as he got older, he knew when to cover his eyes because he would hear the music cue and then he would cover his eyes or hide behind the pillow or the blanket. And then as he got older, he got a little bit more curious. And so then he would start to like peek through his fingers. And so it was just kind of a natural desensitizing development. But I think he has seen Captain Quint get eaten. That was like the last hurdle for him to overcome. And I feel like he's finally made it over that. And I would tell him straight up, it's like, listen, the shark is going to attack somebody. It's going to be a little scary. I don't know if you want to watch it. So you can cover your eyes or not, and I'll let you know when it's over. And I just let him make those decisions. We have watched Jaws, I don't know how many times, like so much so that like he had the movie memorized at like age 4. We would play Jaws during the day. Like we would just go from his bed to the couch and those would be the boats, and he would wear his hat like Captain Quint and he would call me Daddy Chief, and we would just play Jaws. My wife was Mrs. Brody and our dog was Edgar Hooper. And we would just play Jaws and listen to the soundtrack. And so when like ever a musical cue would come on, he would start saying the dialogue and like look out the window in the backyard as if it was the ocean. It's like, shut off the engine, you know? And like it was go time. So I feel like if you explain things to kids, they are a little bit more receptive to stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really just then it becomes a matter of their imagination. And again, if you explain it to them and then if you show it to them, like we live in a great time where it's like all this stuff is readily accessible. I can go onto my phone and show him pictures of the shark out of water on the gimbal while they were filming it.
Yeah.
You know, I can show him pictures of Steven Spielberg sitting in the shark's mouth.
Yeah, I showed
in
my son
between
that
takes.
shot. Yeah, and he thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
I think that the shark looks the most realistic in the original.
Oh, yeah, for sure. As far as the Jaws films go, as a franchise and as a series, he's watched Jaws 2, and that really kind of scared him a little bit because, again, with sequels, they always feel the need to like kick it up a notch. And usually their approach to that is not so much in story and character, but in action and scares and shocks and kills. So usually the higher film in the series, the higher the body count is kind of the working formula. I don't know. The Jaws series itself is really kind of disappointing after the first one. However, I feel like the series also gets a lot of flack and hate from fans because of how good the first one is, and nothing can really live up to that. I feel like the subsequent films are not all that bad, but I don't know. When compared to the original, it's just, it's a different league of film.
I don't need to ever see another shark movie after Jaws. There's just no reason to.
Yeah, I agree with you. After watching Jaws, you don't really like watching the others. I mean, they are not really tasty compared to the first one. For the second one, what I didn't enjoy is the victims, actually. I felt that in the first one, you kind of have time to get attached to the victims. And in the second one, it's just people you don't know. They get eaten by the shark and you don't really have time to understand who they are. And really it pissed me off watching this movie. The third one is, for me, the worst, really. about the story, the characters, and also the photography. Really, nothing is good in in this movie. I'm sorry to say that, but I understood that it was supposed to be a 3D movie, as I am, because that's the title, Jaws 3D. But it really looks fake. Everything looks fake, especially the scene. I don't know if you remember, but the scene with the shark entering into the control room. Really, it's so slow the
Yeah,
way
how could we forget that?
Yeah.
that's the worst scene ever in cinema. But yeah, I didn't like and I didn't like the Sea World concept. I don't know, the war story, I didn't like it. And yeah, I don't know, I really hated this movie. And the fourth one, I think it's okay. The fourth one, I like the title, just the revenge, and I like that they did something with Ellen Brody. I think she deserved more in the first one, so I was happy that they realized it after many years. It's not perfect, of course. It's not as good as the first one, but actually, I like the fact that they kind of humanized the shark. You know, like he wants to get his revenge against the Brody family. I like the idea. I think it was a good idea. But yeah, maybe they didn't develop it the right way, but there is something about the fourth movie.
I completely agree with you, Anne. The third film is the absolute worst of the series. If you look at the numbers online and the reviews online, I'm just gonna lay this out for everybody. If you go and look online, whether it's on IMDb, Letterboxd, Rotten Tomatoes, they're basically in order of release. Jaws is number one. It's like 97%, and it has like an 8.0 or 4.0. Jaws 2, a little bit below that. Jaws 3 has like a 3.7 or a 1.8 rating, depending upon where you're looking, and like 11% freshness. And Jaws the Revenge is 0% freshness, 3.0 rating, 1.6. And I'm going to say it right now, Jaws 4 is not that bad.
Nope.
I have seen bad movies. Jaws 4 gets a bad rep, and I feel like it's because of the shadow of the first film that people love to hate this film, okay? I've watched it twice this week because I watched it by myself, and then my wife wanted to check it out because I was talking to her about it, so we started watching it again. And she was actually really enjoying it as well. Jaws 3 does have bad photography. It has bad acting. It has a bad premise. It has bad setup. It has bad effects. The movie is bullshit. And you should never watch Jaws 3. Furthermore, it is compounded with its bullshit by the fact that, like, okay, yeah, you have like some like namesake characters as the protagonist, Michael and Sean Brody, but really, they could be anybody.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the Brody boys. Okay, so right off the bat, it has no place in this series, in this story of the Brody family versus the shark. Okay, so if you eliminate Jaws 3 and you get Jaws, Jaws 2, and Jaws the Revenge, you have a pretty tight little trilogy there. And there's a lot of consistency with the characters, and there's actual arcs for these characters. There's through lines. And personally, I really liked a lot of the photography in Jaws the Revenge. It looks very nice. It was fun to see Amity in the wintertime. I thought all of those scenes and the setting were just, it was a nice context. It was a nice juxtaposition of the first couple of films that take place in the summertime. And it was nice to see just a glimpse of that year-round island life that they're always talking about in the first two movies, but you only see in the summer when all the tourists show up. It was nice to see, like, no, these people do live there, and they plow their streets, and they celebrate Christmas, and they do like the whole nine, you know. It was really pretty cool. And then to take it to a different location with some new characters was a lot of fun. I thought Michael Caine, he's always solid. Mario Van Peebles, I totally accepted him more so as as the friend Jake than any of the fucking characters in Jaws 3.
Yeah.
You know, Leah Thompson aside, she can't save that movie. It was nice to see her, but I'll take all the right moves any day of the week.
Let me tell you, 2 is not terrible. It's, again, in the wake of the first one.
But check it out. 2 kind of gets a pass because Roy Scheider's in it. That's what I believe. If you actually watch 2 and you see some of the bullshit they pull in that movie, it's right up there with 3 and 4. Like when the fucking lady pours gasoline on herself and then shoots a flare in the boat. Come on.
Yeah, no, I can never stop laughing when she just dumps the gasoline. It's something as so simple as a shot of her struggling to open it and then the shark hits the boat, and then it goes on her. This was just, she just picks it up and just douses herself. I mean, it was pretty terrible. It's basically, it's the Hollywood thing. One worked, so let's just retread that story. It's still him on the beach. There's a shark. Nobody believes him. They don't want to shut down the beach for the summer. It's the same stuff. And then he's got to go out there and he's got to, fight the shark again. I think for me, one of the biggest problems is all the kids on the boats. You want to have a couple kids on the boats, that's fine. You like 25 kids. We didn't need that many. If you would have cut that down to like maybe 10 and developed them a little bit, we could actually care, because let's face the facts. The only reason we cared about Sean and Mike Brody being out there is because we didn't want Sheriff Brody to be devastated if his kid got eaten. That's the only reason we cared about those children on the boats, is because we cared about Brody. Mm-hmm. Jaws 3. I mean, I said I'd never watch it again. I watched it just to rewatch it for this conversation. I have been in love with Leah Thompson my entire life, and I will tell you, it's fantastic to watch her run around in her underwear in 3D. But I mean, my God. First of all, Leah Thompson immediately falls in love with Sean Brody, like mm-hmm. in an instant, which, okay, fine, I guess, for sure.
That doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen unless you're George McFly and, her father hits you with the car. Why do I care? About 40 minutes of this relationship, I don't give a shit. Like, there's nothing of any substance there, and they're laboring to really manufacture these relationships and make us care, and I still don't care. And it's funny, my son's 10, and when the little shark dies, he's like, "This is a Jaws movie. I'm supposed to feel bad for the shark?" Mm-hmm. A 10-year-old brought that to the table, okay, last night. A 10-year-old. So, folks, let's get it together. So the only reason I own the other 3 is because I wanted to own a copy of Jaws: The Revenge. I love Michael Caine. More so, I think he is delightful in part 4. Great jokes. I mean, the guy's got great timing, great delivery. And I agree. There's a couple problems in that movie. More than a couple problems. Okay. But really, if you really finagle around some of that stuff, it's not half bad.
No.
Jaws 3 is an abomination, but I agree with you. I like to see Amity in a different light, right? Christmas time. It also felt like a Jaws movie because we saw the island, and we didn't have to spend the whole movie there, which it didn't, but just it gives you that feel. It was nice to see Ellen Brody back again and have, like Anne said, something a little more substantial to do. Mario Van Peebles, who's usually dicey for me at best, but he was enjoyable in this film. So there's a lot of good things going on in this movie. I just would have made some tweaks, made some things a little bit different. It's not bad. It's definitely not a 0, in my opinion.
I want to start like a Jaws 4 revival campaign. Like, I want to start a revolution for Jaws 4 because I'm sick and tired of it getting beat up and getting a bad rep. It is not a 0. 3 is an abortion of a movie. It's just like, oh, let's just try to like flush this series down the toilet. And Jaws: The Revenge actually tried to like, take the plunger and bring it back to useful function. Yeah. Also, I was reading up a little bit about it. And again, the novelization kind of fills in some of the gaps. And so in the novelization for Jaws: The Revenge, you get a little bit more information that didn't make it into the film, and it puts it in a different context. A lot of people like to hate on Jaws 4 because they think, oh, well, it's bullshit. The shark is following the Brody family around and it follows them down to the Caribbean. No, thank you. That's stupid and that's hokey. But if you read the novelization, you find out that Michael Brody down in the Bahamas caused some conflict and somebody put a voodoo curse on the Brody family.
Oh.
And it's the voodoo that's motivating and driving the shark to attack this family.
There you go. That changes everything.
It's not just, yeah, it does. It's not just the shark being like cognitively aware of the, onslaught that this family has had on his family. If you understand it as a supernatural, mythical kind of presentation of the story, it goes down a little bit easier. And then for me, really, I was watching it and I was like, you know what? This really isn't that bad.
No.
But the last 5 minutes could use a little bit more thought. For a movie with a $20 million plus budget, I feel like a little bit more should have went into the climax of the film, and then they probably would have gotten a better return. Because again, you get through this whole story and then you get to the end and it's just phoned in. And that's what's going to piss people off.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to create your bad word of mouth. You're going to make people sit through all this stuff and then that's what they earn.
Yeah.
It doesn't pay off that way, as opposed to the first film. where they sit through this 2-hour like journey with Chief Brody, and then it gets to the end, and then like it means something,
Yeah.
you know, as opposed to riding a boat into a shark and it spontaneously exploding, and then they reuse footage from the first film to show it sinking. Like, that's really cheap and
Yeah.
phoned in, and now you just blew it. Whatever you had, whatever you've been working towards. I thought Lance Guest did a good job as the older Michael Brody.
Yeah, he did.
And even, you know, I did want to mention the daughter, the little girl, was really great too.
Yes.
And I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but tragically, the little girl in this film was killed about a year after this film was made.
Jeez, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Judith Barcy, who played Ellen Brody's granddaughter, Thea, she was also the voice of Ducky in The Land Before Time.
Oh, wow.
And she was also in All Dogs Go to Heaven. And she was actually murdered by her father
Jeez.
about a year after this film came out. So when people shit on Jaws the Revenge, they shit on her and her legacy. And I won't have it.
Right. One of the biggest problems for me, though, in the climax of this movie is when Ellen Brody gets on the boat to go chase down the shark. I'm fine with that. Take a weapon.
Yeah.
Like, what was the plan? Like, I'm just going to take the boat to the middle of the water and then what? Get eaten? If you think that's going to deter him from going back to get the rest of the people, he's a shark. Even if she would have took like a harpoon gun, I'm right there with you. Go for it.
Yeah, I have a theory about that, but maybe I'm wrong. You know, I'm an overthinker. I like to think a bit crazy. But because I felt the same way for Ellen on the boat, it makes no sense. If you don't have any weapon, why are you going so far? But anyway, I thought that maybe she feels like a curse on her family and she sacrificed herself to end up the curse, maybe. I go very far, I know, but I felt that way.
Like, she's like, just take me and get it over with. I thought that too. Like, you know, take me instead. But then if that's the filmmaker's desired effect, then you really got to give us a little more to make sure that that's landing for the audience.
I'm just going to say that Jaws the Revenge gets a bad rep, and I really don't think it's a 3.0. I don't think it's one of the worst movies ever made, and it is certainly not the worst film of the series. I personally would love to see this come up to maybe like a 4.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
It's not horrible, but it's not great. I definitely would rewatch it over Jaws 3 any day of the week.
I'll never watch Jaws 3
Jaws
again.
3 should just be stricken from the record.
Yeah.
That movie no longer exists. It's retired. I would say Jaws 2 has just as much goofy bullshit going on in it. You know, maybe not quite as much as Jaws 4, but I mean, that scene on the boat with the gasoline and the flare gun is, you know, right up there. And then some of the stupid stuff with the kids near the end.
You know, you had Keith Gordon in there as one of the kids. Like, cut up 20 of those kids. Give me 5 or 10 kids that I could care about, and Keith Gordon being one of them. One of them meets a tragic demise because then the kids know, oh, the shark is here. And then you have that last set of boats with the kids. So yeah, a couple kids, 2 of them being the Chiefs kids, and then Keith Gordon, some of the other, you know, I don't know. It just, like, so many kids, so many shots of just them sailing these little boats. Who cares?
Jaws 2, I would say Jaws 2 and Jaws 4 are probably pretty close. I mean, Jaws 2 inches it out just because you do have Roy Scheider in there. Yeah. It's nice to see his character and to see the growth of his character from the first film into this one. You know, in the first film, he's very mild-mannered, you know, and in the second one, he's just, it's almost as if he's been to war.
Yeah.
And he has this like new edge and new shadow following him around. So I like that aspect of just the growth of Chief Brody's character, but overall it's nothing more special than I think Jaws the Revenge, and we're not even going to speak about Jaws 3 anymore. It doesn't exist.
Jaws 3, I need the Adam West Batman shark repellent for that movie. That's how bad it is.
The first one is the best, and the rest, if you're interested in watching what they did, you can, but you should stay at the first one. That's my idea. But you know, I find somewhere on internet that for the second one, they had a script that they didn't shoot, actually. But the script was pretty good. It was from Dorothy Tristan. Maybe you heard of it. So the idea is that Amity Island has failed to recover from the sharks' bad publicity, and the mayor is collaborating with the mafia to try to recover financially. Brody suffers from post-traumatic stress and sees sharks everywhere and still feels guilty for the death in the previous movie. And Quint's son show up to collect the money his father should have received from getting rid of the shark in the previous movie. And finally, a real right shark attacks, and Brody has to face up his old demons. That's what the idea of it. So I think it would have been so more interesting than the first idea.
Infinitely better.
Yeah, definitely.
I had heard that the plans for Jaws 2 originally involved a sort of prequel approach, and it was going to be based off of Quint's experiences on the USS Indianapolis.
Oh, okay.
And they were going to revisit that idea, but in a long form story. And that was one of the ideas for Jaws 2 originally, was to explore it in a prequel with Quint as the main character, but as a young man, and that whole experience. I feel like either of those would have been better than what we got.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it also depends on the director and their experiences and what they're able to do with it. You know, again, if you look at the book is very different from the film that we got. And a big factor in that was Steven Spielberg and his decisions to focus on the adventure story as opposed to the romantic undertones and subtext of the book. And again, you know, part of the thing that made Jaws so good was the lack of the shark throughout the film, the fact that they didn't have it present throughout the entire film. And again, that was part of the technical difficulties of filming it. Had the shark worked correctly when they were filming, you would have seen a lot more of the shark, and it wouldn't have been as effective. It wouldn't have been as suspenseful. It would have been a completely different movie. So here's a prime example of technical difficulties shaping the outcome of a film to a greater extent than I think the audience were aware of. Because again, they only see the end result. They don't see all the struggle that goes into it. And then from that point on, the sequels just sort of took it and ran and upped it and upped it and upped it until finally it was overflowing with just goofiness and stupidity and no suspense whatsoever. So I think that about does it for us this week on the Visually Hidden podcast. And every week we'll be sharing a new recommendation over there on the YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe and check those out. We'll be talking about them each week in the podcast. Again, you can check out Steven Bendler over on Steve's Pop Culture Corner on Instagram. Anne and I are over on Letterboxd, and you can see what we're watching, what we think about it. So until next week, I'm Peter O'Brien saying, if you're not having fun, you're doing something dumb.